1:47 p.m. Is there a motion to suspend roll call by unanimous consent? All right, the roll call has been suspended. We now move into 2 minutes of final privilege. I'm going to take my final privilege just to respond a little bit. I think that this comes down to two things. The first is that we don't do exit polls. We don't know how people vote. We don't know who they vote for. We don't know how many people vote for. We don't know if they vote along party lines. We don't know if it's split. We do not know, and by making an assumption of how people vote or how many people vote for is just wrong. If you look at even the past election, you can see that the people with A last names have significantly more votes than the people with Z last names. People don't vote for even 37 people in the past. They vote however they deem that they want to vote, and that's not up to us to make an assumption on how people vote, especially when we don't take exit polls. The district model that we have in the past and the zip codes data that we have in the past is not representative of what it is now, and to use how people vote in the past to make a district model is not our job. I also want to state, again, it's not block voting. You can vote for one person, you can vote for 30 people, you can vote for 20. Again, not for us to say, not for us to assume. I do respect every single person on this committee's opinion, and I really do appreciate the debate, and that is my recommendation, again, to have an at-large 38-seat model. Whatever motions you deem to make, I will support as chair, but I waive the rest of my final privilege, and we now move into motions. Do I hear any motions at this time?
I move to amend SSB 2025-1209 to change the number of off-campus seats from the placeholder to 38 by unanimous consent.
There's been a motion to amend SSB 2025-1209 to change XX to 38 for off-campus seats by unanimous consent. Are there any objections? Seeing none, that motion passes.
I move to fail SSB 1209 or 2025-1209 on the criterion of implication under Rule VIII, Section DA12. The apportionment plan before us implies consequences that would entrench one-party control and deny fair representation to off-campus and minority students. In the fall 2024 election map case, the court held that consistently non-majority is not a political opinion. It is a result, meaning that the apportionment that guarantees such a result undermines fair representation. The court also strongly agreed with the petitioner's argument that reapportionment should never be intended to drown out certain voices or certain political opinions. Because these foreseeable effects were not adequately considered, this legislation fails the implication criterion and should not advance by unanimous consent.
There's been a motion to fail SSB 2025-1209 by unanimous consent. Are there any objections?
I object.
There's been an objection.
I remake the motion by majority vote.
There's been a motion to fail SSB 2025-1209 by vote. I'll now read off the names of the committee members. Ethan, if you just want to say their names and then indicate how they voted, either in favor of failing or not in favor of failing, on the minutes. Let us know if you're ready.
Okay.
Yeah, take your time.
Okay, so
Senator Putnam.
Nay to failing 1209.
Senator Katz.
nay.
Senator Britton.
Aye.
Senator Larson.
Aye.
Senator Eisenberg.
Nay.
Senator Levy.
No.
Senator Johnstone.
No.
And the chair abstains. That motion has failed.
Point of agree?
Yes.
Does that mean we still have to vote to pass it or table it? It just means we can't fail it?
That just means nothing has happened yet.
We could still fail it for other reasons if we wanted to. I think
Sure.
we just couldn't remake
Yeah.
the exact
I
same
remake
motion
the
that he made to
Yeah.
do it.
So that was based on implication. You have to have a reason for failing based on constitutionality, implication, legality, clarity, or format. So anyone can make any other kind of motion.
I move to pass SSB 2025-1209 by majority vote.
There's been a motion to pass SSB 2025-1209 by majority vote. We're going to use the same voting procedure as before whenever everyone's ready.
Yes. Sorry, the one's so Senator Putnam,
Aye.
Senator Katz.
Aye.
Senator Britton,
Aye.
Senator Eisenberg,
Aye.
Senator Levy,
Aye.
Senator Comstone.
Aye.
And Chair Wendell.
Point of order.
Oh, sorry.
You're good.
Senator Larson.
Nay.
I abstain. That motion has passed. Okay, moving on. SSB 2025-1210 was withdrawn, so we will skip 1210. We now move into consideration of SSB 2025-1211. Seeing as there is an author present, you have 5 minutes of presentation time whenever you're ready.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. So this rule is, or this authorization would be a slight change to the rules and procedures. When we recently saw the major rules and procedures overhaul that took place at the end of last term, it changed the wording of things, and then it also changed a couple of criteria, limits, stuff like that. So what this authorization would do is revert the number of standing committees a senator is allowed to serve on. In the old rules and procedures, it was 2. The new rules and procedures reduced it down to 1. This authorization would restore that additional standing committee that a senator can be on. When I spoke with the authors of the new rules and procedures about their justification behind that change, it actually made a lot of sense. From their perspective, being members of very large parties, it makes sense that they would want to spread the representation on committees to a larger number of people, rather than allowing individuals to rack up all sorts of different committee positions, resume lines, all that good stuff. And that makes sense from the perspective of a super large party. From the perspective of a minority party, this change is limiting to student voices. As I brought up earlier, there's currently 1 senator in the chamber who is not aligned with the major party in power right now. So therefore, the students who didn't vote for the majority party are only able to serve or see their voice heard on a maximum of 1 standing committees. So I would propose that if parties want to impose an internal rule about the number of committees their members can serve on, I welcome that. I think that could be a great way to increase participation among lots of different groups in the chamber. However, I don't feel that the rules and procedures is the place to make such a designation, particularly because it does limit the voice of minority representation on the standing committees. So simple change, that's my rationale. And if you have any questions, I'm excited to answer them. I yield the rest of my time to the chair.
Thank you. We now enter 5 minutes of question and answer.
I mean, I guess my concern is, what we really want to have on committees, we want to have like subject matter expertise. We want to build people who are experienced, who know the committee, who are able to, fully commit to, becoming an expert on the subject matter of that committee. So do you not think that there's a concern that if you're serving on multiple committees and you're a senator and whatever else you may have on your plate, do you not think that damages the ability to cultivate, subject matter expertise? Like you couldn't be on, like if you were on budget and judiciary, I'm just not sure how you could give both of those seats, how you could, serve in both of those capacities and have the subject matter expertise that you want to have on somebody who's on those committees.
Yeah, I do understand that concern, and I think that concern should be brought up on a case-by-case basis when individuals apply to multiple seats. It's possible that could be something RNA takes into consideration, when the Senate approves RNA recommendations, that can be something that the chamber takes into consideration. So yes, I believe that can be a factor, but I don't believe we should indicate that through the rules and procedures.
My question is, absent Judiciary Committee, how does partisanship really affect the operations of a committee? It's hard for me to come to think of why INC needs 2-party perspectives or why R&E, who approves constituency, needs 2-party perspectives. or arguably budget. So my question is like, what's the importance of a minority voice on a committee like INC?
Absolutely. I think of it less in terms of like partisan perspective and more so different student perspective. The student experience is very different from person to person, and that greatly influences who a student will vote for. Just to pick the low-hanging fruit here, there's a heavy association with Greek life affiliation from the majority party, whereas there's, again, this is case-by-case basis, it's less present in a lot of dissenting voices. So for the example of, I think budget has a lot of cases where different students whose student experiences are very different might want to see A&S fees spent in very different ways. So therefore that perspective is super important on budget. There are certainly use cases for R&E as well with the application of rules. I agree with you that it's probably the least pronounced on INC, but particularly for the issue of budget, judiciary, and R&E, I think it's important to just have the option for one person to share their voice in both spaces.
I think I understand. Actually, I gotta say that for debate. Never mind. It's not a question. Are we in debate or?
This is question.
Okay, never mind. I'll say it for debate.
Are there any other questions? All right, seeing none, we now enter 5 minutes of debate, starting now.
I can see how, like, in the exact current situation that we're in, I can see what you're saying, like, you want to have a minority party that can be seated on multiple committees, but I think, like, on the whole, you know, it harms representation, because if you have one person that's sitting on multiple committees, you're not able, and that's another person who could be able to sit on that committee, who could be able to sit on that committee and develop and be an expert and great at that committee and just that committee. That's somebody's spot that you're taking, that person would be taking up by serving on two. And so I think, honestly, there's an argument to be made that it has the opposite effect in terms of limiting representation, because that's another person who's not eligible to serve on a committee.
I'd also argue,
Kind of jumping in on that, I mean, I think minority voices are incredibly important to Senate as a whole, and obviously through Senate, also committees. I think that is an incredibly important part of kind of the way we operate and just democracy in general. However, I think when we're kind of focusing on making the codes, I don't think we should necessarily look at it from a partisan perspective. When I'm viewing kind of the 1 to 2 threshold, I think in terms of looking at democracy and the greatest kind of advocacy for students as a whole, we want the most senators, because obviously each senator represents constituents, and the more senators we have on committees, the more constituents that are recommended. And I think kind of just looking at the numbers, like there are 8 committee seats for each committee. So there's 36 seats. By limiting it to 1, we allow roughly a third of our Senate to have a voice on the committee. And I think that by raising it to 2, I mean, you made the argument that obviously a party can limit their people, but I don't necessarily want to look at this from a partisan perspective at all. I think kind of it hindering, or assuming that a party's going to make that rule is not something that this committee should be doing. Instead, we should be saying, what is the best way that we can serve Senate as a whole? And I think that argument is, by limiting it to 1, we maximize the amount of our senators that can serve their constituents and represent them on a committee. And, you know, let's say 10 senators serve on 2 committees. That lowers the threshold from roughly a third of Senate on a committee to only 25% of Senate serving on a committee. And I think kind of not even just for representation, but also to our senators themselves. I know many people want to serve on a committee. Obviously, not everyone gets a committee seat. We can look at R&A. There are sometimes 20 people who apply for 2 seats on a committee, on 1 seat on a committee. So obviously it is competitive to get on a committee, and I think for kind of the basis of ensuring people have a fair shot, that a senator doesn't have to serve a full Senate term without having the opportunity to serve on a committee, that having that threshold in there does allow us the most democratic and the most voice to, you know, students as a whole and to senators. But
to the point of partisanship, I agree that we should not be making legislation from a partisan perspective. However, when I asked the authors of the bills that changed this threshold, their response was of a partisan nature. So that's why I introduced my perspective to counterbalance that. But I do completely agree with you that that's not really the mindset we should be in when making legislation. And to that point, that is why this is a reversal of a recent, or of one small aspect of a recently passed piece of legislation that would revert the rules and procedures back to how they were just a couple weeks ago. But I do hear the arguments of representation, and
I'm just kind of looking at, like, obviously, yes, it did change a couple weeks ago, but looking at it from the perspective that, like, this is the RMP that the Senate just passed, I kind of view it as terms of, like, almost like the implication that this would have on senators now, and I think, like, obviously, new senators as a whole, and just, like, constituents kind of voices through those senators, like, if we do change it or reverse back to 2, we are kind of implicating that there is most likely, at least at some point, like, I don't want to make any assumptions based on when things will happen. Like, the code should not be like, we should not be looking at it from a perspective of like today. It should be looking at perspective as like Senate as a whole and how it operates kind of in, you know, just on a time, like not just from the perspective of today, but also tomorrow and the day after that and, you know, years to come. And I just think that there is going to be an implication based on kind of less representation of senators on committees, because I think it is completely reasonable to assume that at some point in the future there will be multiple senators who would be on 2 committees at once. And I mean, even 10 lowers the threshold from a third of senators serving on a committee to only a quarter. And if that's even higher, we could get down to, I mean, a very small minority,
That
like
includes the time.
12 people.
All right, that concludes debate. We now move into 2 minutes of final privilege whenever you're ready.
Awesome. Thank you. So I enjoyed the debate. I think we talked on some serious concerns and some things to think about. I would argue that the majority of the content we talked about in debate is debate which should be had on the Senate floor. We're debating the particulars of this bill and is it a good bill, is it a bad bill? And that's a super important question, but it's a question to be held on the Senate floor. Our job as the Judiciary Committee is to come to the conclusion of if this bill is valid under the 5 criteria. And to me, I find the idea that a section of our codes that's been in the codes for quite a while, up until a couple weeks ago, is in violation of the 5 criteria. So with that, I yield the rest of my time to the chair.
Alrighty, we're now in line for any motions. Do I hear any motions at this time?
I move to fail SSB 1211 based on the based on the form, like based on implication. By unanimous consent.
There's been a motion to fail SSB 2025-1211 based on implication by unanimous consent. Are there any objections?
I object.
I move to fail SSB 2025-1211 by majority vote
There's been a motion to fail SSB.
on the basis of implication.
There's been a motion to fail SSB 2025-1211 on the basis of implication by majority vote. We're now going to move into the same voting procedure as earlier. Senator Putnam.
Yay.
Senator Katz.
Yay.
Senator Britton.
Yay.
Senator Larson.
Nay.
Senator Eisenberg.
Yay.
Senator Levy.
Yeah.
Senator Comstone.
Yeah.
The chair abstains. That motion has passed. I am now going to actually move us into a recess. We've been at it for over 2 hours. Let's take a bathroom break, get something to drink, and we will reconvene. So do I hear a motion to lay the committee at rest at 2:06 p.m.?
So moved.